Hi, it's me. That little voice inside your head. You spent all year taking care of business. Let Office Depot Office Max take care of you. There's this new HP Pavilion laptop with 8th generation Intel Core i5 processor. Save $200. Now just $449. Look at it. It's only $449 at Office Depot Office Max. Go ahead. You deserve it.
Taking care of business.
Offer ends 11/11. Limit 1.
This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Kyle Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. NBA season in full gear, 2 weeks in. A lot of great gameplay. A lot of eyes focused on the rookies who have been balling out. But everyone has still got themselves glossy-eye frame tuned in to everything that is happening with the greatest player on the planet in LeBron James, the Golden State Warriors, and teams like the San Antonio Spurs, what they do without their superstar, who they're going to step up. It's a lot of great storylines to be mentioned. Just great time to be an NBA fan, whether you're in fantasy involved or you're just a spectator, an avid fan of the sport. It's great to see these guys taking the reins, so to speak, the young guns taking the reins, wanting a piece of the pie to be at the top of the conferences respectively for their teams. It's just great stuff happening right now. We got a lot going on, and we got a great show on tap. So let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, 50 grand, NBA aficionado, my brother from another mother, represents www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. Are you as shook up about the Cavaliers' struggles as the rest of the NBA consortium?
You already know the answer to that, my dude. I'm not worrying about these Cavaliers even the slightest bit.
You're kind of cavalier about them being cavalier.
Very cavalier about that. I see what you did right there, brother. But as always, man, salute to all the fans, listeners of NBA Baseline, as you alluded to. Amazing show on tap, man. I think it's going to be a lot of fun topics that we're going to be discussing. You know, a little more debate style as opposed to the news and note style that we usually do on our podcast. So hopefully our fans and listeners enjoy this one, bro.
Yeah, man. This is and listen, kudos to you, Shaw. Because as we go through the course of the NBA season, I know a lot of people are following the Twitter feeds probably more so than following what has been happening when the beat writers kind of chime in, weigh in after certain games, certain high-profile games. But sometimes we like to kind of think a little bit outside the box and kind of put you, the listener, in the fold as well, too. Get you guys thinking a little bit. And so the topic for us this week in the breakdown is going to be focused more so on the backcourt, on the front court players. We often talk how this is a backcourt-oriented league right now. The most prolific players in the game are coming from your guard position. But what about the front court players? Are we seeing an emergence, a respectability, so to speak? Because probably to many people's mindset, LeBron James, that era of the three, the point forward, might be a dying breed. The Kevin Durant's. Well, hold the horses a little bit. We're going to go through a list of some front court trios that might actually intrigue you on the possibilities about who might be pulling in the reins and being the best in the NBA. And then in our segment of the drop, we got our over and under segment. We got some players that we got to throw out there. Are they overrated or are they underrated? So a lot to get into. Once again, we appreciate you and yours for tuning in to our show, the Baseline NBA Podcast. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA or get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. Available on all the major platforms, Microsoft TuneIn, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Player FM, iHeartRadio, Google Music, Roku channel. You can always catch the Baseline on Instagram if you ever want to check out our upcoming episodes and the link to get to that show. Big shout outs to our peoples, the Almighty Ballers Network. Be sure to check out Almighty Ballers Radio to get the goods that you need regarding the NBA 24/7. Shout outs to 16 Wins a Ring, the most prolific website that covers the NBA. If you need to read up on what's happening, you definitely go to 16 Wins a Ring. And also catch us on Dash Radio. We are premiering on Dash Radio, the NBA channel, the Baseline NBA Podcast. We are all over your digital media platform. So be sure to download us and be your go-to resource discussing all things happening in the association. You know how we do, and you know how we roll. It's time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it
I breaks
down.
it down to the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Callie Warrenshaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. This week on the breakdown, we're going to deviate a little bit. Often when we start talking about teams in the NBA, we normally gravitate to the point guard position because your most premier and prolific players that have been dominating the NBA outside of the name of LeBron James and maybe Kevin Durant are your guards, your Steph Currys, your Russell Westbrooks, your James Hardens, your Chris Pauls. The era of the guard has totally engulfed our perception about how the NBA is being played. Even some of the great statistics that are being used, the numbers crunching, analytics, so to speak, have been ushered in because of the way the guards are playing and have kind of tilted the way that we look at the game. Something has been forgotten through the thrust of this. And maybe it's in good nature that we do this to remind ourselves that basketball is not just about the 1 and 2 position. It's also about the 3, 4, and the 5. And so right now, we want to take a step back and actually look at what we consider to be the best front court trio that's representing in the NBA. So, Shaw, I'm going to throw this out because I want to kind of lay out the landscape a little bit. Because normally when we talk about the front court trios that are the best in the NBA, we got to put some context into that. Because with the way things have taken place in this offseason, the moves that have been made, and when we start breaking down some of these trios that might represent what we consider as the best front court trio in the NBA, we're kind of trying to figure out, well, how do we dictate that? Do we dictate that because of what the numbers represent, of what they're doing currently right now? Do we dictate that because of their name and what they have done in the game so far? Or do we dictate this by what they have achieved thus far? So there's so many ways that we could go about doing this. And I was kind of curious about your perspective, Shaw, about how you would want to look at us being able to dictate what we consider as the best front court trio happening in the game right now.
I think one of the greatest things about this conversation is the fact that it is such a mixed bag, and we have to look at all of it, I think, to really have a true representation of what could be the best front court trio, if you will. And this is really kind of going back to an old school way of thinking things. This is the original big threes, if you will, because your small forward, power forward, and center, although the game has changed, those positions still very much matter. What made this conversation even hard, though, for me in deciding was a lot of times teams didn't have a great third person, whether it wasn't a great center or a great small forward. Somebody seemed to be missing in that. And then they also take into accommodations that, a lot of, especially between the small forward and the shooting guard, those are just wing guys right now, right? So sometimes you just don't know, okay, like in the case, not tipping the hand here a little bit, but in the case of like the Minnesota Timberwolves, is Jimmy Butler the 2, or is he the 3, or is Andre Wiggins the 2, or is he the 3? So those conversations, I think, make it a little bit more interesting to have. But, for purposes of what we're going to be discussing on the podcast, I think it is taking a look at all of those things. Some teams that have just formed, some front courts that have just formed this season, looking at kind of what those players' body of works are and what they will bring to their new teams in some instances. And then the case of, like a Golden State Warriors now who have a little bit of chemistry behind themselves, with a year under the belt with their trio in that front court as well, too. So I think that is what's going to make this conversation, very interesting. It's going to drive how we decide what is kind of our top 3 front court players, front court teams in the NBA today.
You brought up something really interesting as you were addressing what we're trying to set are the parameters to being able to determine who we consider as the best front court trio right now happening in the game, or at least the top 3, right? It's interesting because you had mentioned the fact that when we talk about the original 3, the OG 3, so to speak, we often talk about the big 3. You got your 2 guys on the side, and then you got your big in the middle, clogging the paint. And usually that represents big man ball. It's funny how the way that the game has evolved, because the way that we dictate how the bigs play is more oriented to small ball play, and how we look at how the guards often play now, it's almost gravitated towards big boy play. You know what I'm saying? So it's almost like the role reversal of where we have set those expectations of how the game was being played maybe some 10, 15 years ago. And now what we're talking about is versatility. Guys that not only can play not only play their position, but can play multiple positions and have the same kind of impact outside of that normal position that they play. Guys like a Jimmy Butler, guys like a Kawhi Leonard, and even to a degree, we even talk about guys like Kevin Durant who defy the logic in the way that they play the game. A guy that is 7 feet tall that shoots the 3 ball like his name is Steve Kerr. You know what I'm saying? Like, that to me is it's obtuse in our old mind way of thinking, but that's how we kind of navigate and try to narrate some type of storyline between how we're looking at these kind of combinations and whether or not that equates greatness and success in this modern NBA.
Yeah, and it's a complex, I think, equation of bringing all of those things together. What, again, for me, when having the conversation, am I taking too much of my old school mentality? Being a guy who grew up in the 90s, if you will, and 2000s on that style of basketball. But as you alluded to a little bit now, it's funny because the bigs are now smaller and the guards are also now bigger. It's all about speed and versatility, in the NBA game. But yeah, we're taking it back a little bit here now and just kind of looking at positions and looking at that trio, small forward, power forward, center for these rosters and who kind of makes up the best of that bunch and that crop.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's start from the 3 position, right? Like, let's start at number 3 because we said we want to do a top 3 assessment of the top front court trios in the game. Who would you ideally look at when we talk about combination trios? Like, who would you say would be the 3rd best in the game right now?
Yeah, it's tough for me. It really, really is. I have a lot of respect for a lot of the trios out there, and we're not going to name them all, but I look at Chris Middleton, Giannis Antetokounmpo, but then it's Thon Maker. Do they make the cut, if you will? Wilson Chandler, Paul Millsap, Nikola Jokic, do they make the cut? Gallinari, Blake, and DeAndre, like that should be where I want to start. You know what I mean? And I'm struggling here, so I want to have a little bit of debate with you here right now. I would put Gallinari, Blake, and DeAndre right there up against the young trio of Robert Covington, Ben Simmons, and Joel Embiid. Now, the funny thing about Simmons is he's playing a point forward position, but he's really their power forward because they start a guy like Bayless and they'll start Fultz eventually and everything like that too. So he really qualifies as, kind of their power forward in this situation. So help me decide, bro, between Robert Covington, Ben Simmons, and Embiid, and Gallinari, Blake, and DeAndre, who should be in that 3rd spot?
I'm gonna put Gallinari, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan, and I'm gonna give this to you for 2 very simple reasons. The first reason I'm looking at this is you have a perennial MVP-like player in Blake Griffin, okay? And usually when you have a player like that, somebody that can easily give you 30-plus points a night when he puts his mind to it, that automatically puts you in a very, very ideal situation. If you were going to make a comparison to who of the trio between Covington, Simmons, and Embiid can give you that, right now we'll probably say Joel Embiid. The problem is that Joel Embiid does not give that enough to you know what I'm saying, to usurp what we've already seen from Blake Griffin. Then you look at DeAndre Jordan. DeAndre Jordan has had 20-20 nights, right? We haven't seen that yet from Joel Embiid. Now, to counter that, you could probably say Ben Simmons is a walking triple-double. He is your LeBron James, like a 7-day free trial on Netflix. You know what I'm saying? Before you actually pay for the actual goods. But does that equate to what you've already seen from DeAndre Jordan? And then with Danilo Gallinari is a pure scorer. While he is a liability defensively, when he is healthy, he is amongst one of the best shooters in the game of basketball. And so you have that combination, and you can say, wow, the Clippers, if nothing else, should easily be maybe the 3rd or 4th best team in the Western Conference off of that premise alone. We don't know if that's what that'll equate to, but we can certainly see the upside when these guys get on the floor and this team offensively explodes. All of them, to me, represents at least being the 3rd best or one better over Covington, Simmons, and Embiid.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that's where I definitely want to go. So, we'll probably get some hate on this, but I'm gonna tip my hand a little bit here too.
In the immortal words of Eddie Murphy in Vampire in Brooklyn, hate is good. Hate is your friend.
because when we exclude a trio like LeBron James, Kevin Love, and Tristan Thompson, you know what I mean? LeBron James is one of the best players, is the best player in the NBA. Kevin Love, same thing, a top 15, top 20 talent alongside. Again, then there's Tristan Thompson. For me, I'm going to go with the overall trio that does the most amount total. You know what I mean? So that's why Boogie Cousins, Brow, then Dante Cunningham don't make my list. Although Davis and Cousins are top 5 potential players in their own rights, Cunningham just brings the value of that trio down just so far. It's hard for me to go that. So I'm just saying, all right, well, who's doing enough across the board in those 3 positions for me to go ahead and rank them? And again, I think with Danilo, Blake, and DeAndre, you're looking at a very formidable trio right there. Defensively, maybe not the best. Obviously, DeAndre is the best defender of that group by far and away. But what you can get out of them, playmaking wise, athleticism, shooting as well too, I think that trio definitely deserves to be number 3. I think on this list.
Yeah, and let me also preface this as well too, that it obviously is saying something when we see what the upside can be. And a little bit later on, Shaw, we'll touch on, if we weren't saying that these guys are top 3, who would we consider to have the most upside? Who would we consider to be possibly the most intimidating? Who potentially has the one to be the most implosive when you look at these type of trios? Because I think that all comes into play. I think sometimes people get too enamored, either too much on the numbers or too much on the names. And you have to find a happy medium in order for you to be able to really delve into assessing what is considered as a top 3 FrontCourt type trio in this type of situation. So we've come to this conclusion that we can at least say that the trio of Gallinari, Griffin, and Jordan are third best. Who do we think that can usurp what these guys would really set as the lower end of the bar in this standard? Who would be next?
Yeah, for me,
number 2.
For me, who I got next is probably going to be another young trio. Newly formed. I shouldn't say young. A newly formed trio, and that's the trio of Minnesota of Jimmy Butler, Taj Gibson, and Karl-Anthony Towns. With Towns being, again, one of the elite players in the NBA, Jimmy Butler an all-NBA type player as well too, and Gibson being just a elite role player, and a guy now even this season who's been able to stretch his game out to shoot that corner 3 ball. So he's not clogging up the lane in case Towns wants to get down there and gets down and dirty, or if Butler wants to drive the lane as well too. Gibson is an acceptable, pick and pop type guy. Always had a nice little mid-range game too, but again, now extending out to that corner 3 where he can kind of camp out there and be an outlet for Butler on a driving kick, or even Towns sometimes, if he gets doubled in the post, if you will. I really like this trio. They're obviously, like I said, young and very newly formed per se. And again, maybe not a lot of people will agree with it. We may not have enough a body of work to see them together. But to me, I think this is a group that does it on both ends, especially in the case of Butler and Gibson. Towns is an emerging defender. I know there's a lot of conversation about he doesn't defend very, very well, but I think Tibbs is getting in his ear. I'm sure Jimmy Butler's also getting in his ear. And I think this is going to be a trio in the front court that's going to be very formidable for seasons to come.
This was really tough for me because, again, we could have easily been having this conversation about whether or not Jimmy Butler, Taj Gibson, and Karl-Anthony Towns could be considered as third best if you had to make the comparison between them, Gallinari, Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan. Where I'm struggling with this, Shaw, I look at Kawhi Leonard, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Paul Gasol, and I say to myself, who would, as far as equal, would be to your guys, Butler, Gibson, and Karl-Anthony Towns, and you asked me to choose between the two. Because when I look at what Kawhi Leonard brings to the table, Kawhi Leonard is arguably one of the most explosive players on both sides of the basketball, and that just can't be ignored. LaMarcus Aldridge, and I think this is where we have that little caveat. How does LaMarcus Aldridge, a person who averages, went on his own, I guess is the best way to put it, went on his own, can easily give you 24, 25 points per game, right? Why that can't translate with a combination of him and Kawhi Leonard. And Paul Gasol, to me, is like the stabilizer. While he is the oldest, he still is the most reliable. And really, when you look at a lot of the other centers that are out there, if they're not on the side of youthfulness, they really are obsolete. They're really considered as the weakest link that really gives you nothing, right? Paul Gasol has always been someone that can probably give you like a double-double. It's just weird because we haven't seen it translate to that type of success that we thought was potentially supposed to happen with the San Antonio Spurs. I think so much dependency is on Kawhi Leonard that he represents a bulk of how we look at that trio, than how these guys collectively can come in and make, maximum impact, maximum damage. So to your point, I can agree with you about Jimmy Butler, Taj Gibson, and Karl Anthony Towns, because when I look at the combination of Butler and Towns, they combined have more room to provide maximum impact, maximum damage against opposition in the NBA than I'm currently seeing right now from the combination of Kawhi Leonard, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Paul Gasol. Which then leads me to this question for you. Where would you rank those guys when we look at Leonard, Aldridge, and Gasol? If we say that Butler and Gibson and Towns are second best, where would you then put LaMarcus Aldridge, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul Gasol to some degree?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head for me when it comes to LMA, in terms of I don't trust the LMA we're seeing this season to be that effective and proficient when Kawhi is actually back on the court. So if we're going back to last year, what this trio did is like they were still very good, and obviously because Kawhi was an MVP type candidate, but LaMarcus was very underwhelming for much of the season, as was Powell, because he was a little bit banged up and he's older now and just didn't really matriculate into the San Antonio offense the way that I would have thought he would have. He had some great years in Chicago, surprisingly good years in Chicago, after looking like he was washed in LA, goes to Chicago, bounces back, comes to San Antonio and kind of regresses again. So that to me is concerning, and that's why I have that trio a little bit outside of that top three. I mean, they're still within the realm of being mentioned, so maybe 5, 6 somewhere in there, just depending on who else you want to put in there. And obviously we kicked out the combination of Covington, Simmons, and Embiid, so they'd be somewhere in that conversation for me. But for me, because I don't trust LMA to play this well with Kawhi, I don't have them that high up in my rankings of the FrontCourt conversation.
You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, our segment of the breakdown, as we look at who we might consider as the top front court trios that's representing the game right now. All right, Shaw. So we've got, 3-2, and now so let's get to number 1. Because I think now this is going to blow up. It's going to blow the doors wide open, right? You know what I'm saying? We might have to take a poll about, who they going off of the show first, you or me, okay, when this is all said and done. Who do you have now as being the best of the best that would represent the front courts combinations that we have in the game?
So here's where recency bias is definitely coming into play. So I qualify my responses, and I don't know if people are listening to that, but I think they just hear the end result. For me, I think right now the best front court trio in the NBA would be the combination in OKC of Paul George, Carmelo Anthony, and Steven Adams. They have, of the most of the group that we've talked about, they have actually the highest plus minus as a trio together. They're actually a plus 10. As we record this show, when those three are out there. I looked at some of these other groups out here and I was stunned. Again, I keep throwing Cunningham and Brow and Boogie under the bus, but that trio is a negative 101 in 8 games played. Cunningham, Davis, and Cousins, which is amazing to me. So when you think about that, how hard it is to kind of have a positive net rating with certain guys and certain people combinations on the floor, the fact that OKC right now in the early stage of their season, and just because of the body of work of what Paul George brings, what Carmelo brings, and Steven Adams, with Paul George and Adams, 2 guys who are tough and good defenders, if you will. Adams hasn't made all defensive teams or anything like that too, but we know he's gritty, he's a hustler. And then Carmelo as a guy who can definitely help and carry your offense and can use his physicality to play defense in spurts too. So for me, I think on both sides of the basketball, this is probably one of the best trios, not one of the best trio in terms of overall realistic front court players in the NBA today. And again, I know they're just formed, they just got together, but I think this is a conversation that is valid, especially but what we've seen based on early season results.
Now, it's interesting that you bring that up, Shaw, because let's go, to your point, let's go back to the Cunningham, Davis, and DeMarcus Cousins that represents the New Orleans Pelicans, right? Why aren't we talking about that trio, that combination? I get it. A lot of people are going to look at Dante Cunningham as the weakest link, but you can make the argument that with Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins, then when we talked about when this combination was formed, that there should have been this dawning of a dawn of reckoning. You know what I'm saying? Kind of like the Justice League. Like, oh no, we didn't want to see this kind of combination. This was what we didn't want to see with bastardized trades, right? That happened with Demps and Divock, right? We didn't want to see what we saw when the Vancouver Grizzlies, the Memphis Grizzlies moved Paul Gasol to go play for Kobe Bryant, and then all hell broke loose. But then when they got together, we have still yet to see come to fruition the dominance, right? The sheer utter intimidation factor. As we discuss these things about front court trios and what that impact can be in today's modern NBA, we're not seeing where this type of combination and potential can shake up the foundation of how we perceive the NBA right now.
Right. Well, I think with New Orleans, they're just in a tough spot for whatever reason. Like, they just haven't produced all together. You have to search wide and far to find combinations of any sort, front court or otherwise, where you're actually seeing a positive net rating in lineups that at least have played 100 minutes or more at this point in the season. Like, if you're doing 25 minutes, 30 minutes, that, like, to me, I can't even calculate that. That doesn't mean anything. They're three-man combinations. There are nothing in 100 minutes or more that has a net rating has a positive net rating. The best thing they have is a negative 59, and that's with Cousins, Holiday, and Etuan Moore. So that just kind of shows where New Orleans is at, And then even if you look at just the duo of Cousins and Brow to date, as we record the show, they are negative 55, on the court together, despite how good both of those guys are individually and how good they should be together. So again, that's where he's like, okay, well, our numbers telling the true sense of the story here. And I think with them, it's definitely a case of their overall teammates, why they're not nearly as good. But again, when we're looking at things in a vacuum, okay, well, really, which trio has the most value? That definitely knocks them out of the conversation altogether. And that's why I look at a team like Carmelo, Paul George, and Steven Adams in OKC as my number one trio. Because again, I said they're yielding positive results as we record. And just the eye test alone tells me that this is a good group of players, especially with Adams kind of emerging as a nice option for them offensively and continue to play good defense.
All right, now Shaw, we laid low for a little bit, right? We were able to withstand the barrage that we're probably going to be getting hit with our with our assessments of this, because I know the very next question that people will be throwing at us: how the hell are you going to have this conversation and we're not talking about Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, and any you can say Jaja. I'm going to be like anybody that Steve Kerr feels like throwing in at the 5 position on any given night with the Golden State Warriors. And then LeBron James, Kevin Love, and Tristan Thompson. Like, why aren't those guys in that conversation or a representation when we talk about front court trios that they would be amongst the best or would be the most dominant that represents that kind of combination in the NBA? So to that, Shaw, right. What do you say to that?
Well, and I think with maybe even more so in the case of Cleveland, because of what Tristan has meant for them, over the course of his career there. There's a valid argument to be made there, because we know Tristan is not supposed to be. He's not a great scorer, whatever the case would be. He's a good rebounder. He's decent defender on the pick and roll as well.
He technically was supposed to be a power forward, but his game has never evolved where he could be a legitimate power forward in the game, and they had to basically have him play more center.
Right. So in that regard, I'm saying they probably are top 5, if you will, just even based on that as well too. But when I start looking at what's kind of happened even this season, and again, this is what I'm saying, it's just how much percentage of what's happening now to what's happened in the past you want to give to things. And I'm looking, okay, well, looking at the here and now, is that a trio that has yielded positive results or good results? And with the Cavs' early struggles, that's a no. And they started the season with Kevin Love playing center and Tristan Thompson on the bench. Now Tristan is out with an injury. Love's going back to center, but when he was there, they weren't playing good even with that trio together. And again, that's still a result of the entire team, so it's hard to just look at those 3 guys and put the blame on them, especially in case of LeBron, who's obviously all-world and doing everything. But for me, I'm just looking at it totality. Are you losing anything with one of those 3 guys on the floor? And that's the same thing in the case of Kevin Durant and Zaza Pachulia. It's just like, all right, well, Zaza, how many minutes does he actually play on a regular basis, especially when it comes down to closing time? Is he the guy who's out there, or are they playing more small ball with Draymond Green and Iguodala and Durant? And then, okay, well, is that in essence, does that be the trio that we're looking at in terms of the front court, Iguodala, Durant, and Draymond Green? And then if that's the case, well, then that changes the conversation a little bit. But I went pretty much by just looking at the starters of these teams and saying, okay, who's the best and who would I most be willing to have, in my lineup at the end of close games.
Yeah, look, it's all about ratio to me, right? Hence the reason why I said, like, you use Zaza because he's who's in the starting lineup on the lineup card. But then when you look at the numbers and the metrics of what Zaza kind of represents, I almost feel like it's kind of like play it by ear, or it just depends on the kind of matchups that Steve Kerr wants, with the roster that he's playing with that night. Okay. So much of that load is on Kevin Durant, Draymond Green to make up what we're talking about, that dominance as front court players. I'm going to lean more so to the fact that the evolution of Kevin Durant defensively speaks volumes to me about how they could easily ascend themselves as a top 3 front court trio because of what he brings to the table. But when Zaza really gives you nothing, it almost makes it obsolete. It's rather than we're talking about duos in the front court rather than we're talking about trios. And I'm almost going to say the same thing about that with Tristan Thompson. Now, if you gave me Tristan Thompson some 3 years ago, okay, then we'd be talking about how those contributions make an impact in some way, shape, or form that offsets so much of the burden being on LeBron James and so much of the burden being on Kevin Love and his offensive capabilities. Forget just the defensive. Kevin Love is a force in the NBA. He's a scorer, no question, and he works well with LeBron James, okay? But at the end of the day, Tristan Thompson, to me, he's faded. And his numbers don't represent completely as much as what we look at what he contributes when we look at that front court those front court combinations. Like if you left Tristan Thompson on an island, he easily would be a better basketball player than Zaza Pachulia. The problem is that when you combine them in their respective teams, both of them just cancel each other out. And that's the reason why it's so difficult for us to put those guys in that kind of conversation, because the burden is always going to be on the best players. And sometimes the best players make too much of that pie that justifies the whole. Now, I got an interesting take on this, Shaw. There's clearly a trio combination that we might not be talking about that deserves to be considered or deserves to get some love in this segment of the show. I know you know who I'm talking about. It's a team that forget that. This team just came out of nowhere and has helped the Orlando Magic become a very impressive basketball team. And why would we think that?
Well, I think when you look at the trio now, when you alluded to with the Magic of Evan Fournier, Aaron Gordon playing his natural power forward position, and Nikola Vucevic, who's stretched his game out now to be like Brook Lopez last season, where he's banging 5-6 threes a game. This trio right now is playing great basketball and definitely is going to be shooting up the charts. And if we had this conversation at the end of the season, I think they would probably definitely be in the top 5 and top 3. And this is just a situation for me where I quite haven't seen enough because, Gordon is just now kind of coming into his own, and Fournier has been good for a little while now. But you can even still argue is he the 3 or is he the 2? And I think, if you look at the box sheets, it's saying that he's the 3 and Terrence Ross is the 2. And again, that's interchangeable. But overall, as a group, offensively, they're spectacular. They're definitely putting the numbers up there. Defensively, they still have a lot to be desired. But because the Orlando Magic are playing such great basketball as we record this session, this is definitely one of those up and coming trios that I think are going to be one that you definitely have to watch in terms of the front court dominance that they're able to put out there on a night-to-night basis.
Oh, man, listen. Aaron Gordon. Like, I can't tell between the two of them, because if you look at how both of these guys, Aaron Judge for the New York Yankees, Aaron Gordon for the Orlando Magic, and what these guys have basically done, their turnaround from their struggles a year ago to what we're now seeing from these guys, and whether or not Aaron Gordon can sustain this high level of play like Aaron Judge did for the New York Yankees through the course of a season, it would be remarkable. And we would be remiss to not put him in a conversation of being most improved if this is how he's going to be playing all the way up until game 82 of this regular season, right? Like it would be ridiculous. And then we would be talking about the Orlando Magic, no question, being amongst the 8 teams participating in the Eastern Conference playoffs for this upcoming season. We'll see how that plays out. But we already know what we've gotten from Evan Fournier. The question is, can he stay healthy? And we've already known what we could have gotten from Nikola Vucevic if he has a head coach that believes in what he can give you at the 5 position. And you combine all these 3 guys, that could be the recipe for the Orlando Magic sneaking up on teams and having an impact, much less the same way that we were talking about last year with teams like the Washington Wizards. If they started getting contributions from Marcin Gortat, Otto Porter, and Markieff Morris, that is what helped. We already know the dominance of Wall and Beal. But the combination of Morris, Gortat, and Porter last season is what really helped propel that basketball team to win games that they were incapable of winning last season before that and got them into the Eastern Conference playoffs. We could be talking about the same thing with this Orlando Magic team.
Yeah, you're right. And it's funny as you mentioned that, looking up their stats in 156 minutes, I'd call it 157, they're plus 14. So even higher than the OKC trio, which, I alluded as my number 1 group, if you will. But again, because I'm still a little unsure about Aaron Gordon, I'm still a little unsure about Fournier. I don't know if Vucevic continued to play this great, especially from the perimeter. That's why I'm still a little bit skeptical. But if it turns about the trios that are on the come up, it would definitely have to be this Orlando Magic trio. And then also the trio in Philadelphia that we already discussed in terms of Rocco, Simmons, and Embiid, bro. All right. Like I said, those 2 right there are definitely on the way up.
Real quick, Shaw, honorable mentions: Chris Middleton, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Thon Maker. What would it take for us to have these guys in this conversation that we've had about the top trios in the NBA? What would it take for them?
I think just for Thon to really kind of evolve into the player that he probably can be. And not to say that he's going to be this double guy and he's never going to be that, heavy. He's always going to be slider frame, but he just needs to be effective out there. And if he can, it's a terrible comparison, but if he can put up Taj Gibson-like numbers, he's not going to be Taj Gibson and not going to do it the exact same way. But those types of numbers, 11 and 8, that type of stuff or whatever, then yeah, I think this is a trio that becomes into it. Middleton started the season off a little bit rough. And so that I've had to take that into account, and taking them out a little bit. But I think Middleton is a great basketball player. Obviously, Giannis is an MVP candidate. So you couple that, their playmaking, their ability to play both sides of the basketball, and even in the case of Thon Maker, if he really emerges, then this is another young trio that can be right in the midst of the conversation as well.
Wow. So many different combinations. And maybe, Shaw, this is the start of something that we're trending towards. We're redirecting our eyes, our focus, our attention, not just on who has the greatest backcourt combination that ultimately will get you to an NBA Finals. It might actually be what you're getting from out of your front court players. And certainly there is a heavy loaded list of guys that are on the come up, and certainly ones who have already established themselves. And it's just not Kevin Durant and LeBron James anymore. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Breakdown. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. And this is The Drop. So our topic for The Drop is we got a little over-under thing going on. You know what I'm saying? Are some players overrated? Are they underrated? Shaw has provided us with a nice list for us to delve into. And I kind of feel like the Emperor in Gladiator. I kind of feel like, should I give him the thumbs up or should I give him the
thumbs down?
Thumbs down. And we ain't talking Yankee style, people. We ain't talking Yankee style when we giving him the thumbs down. All right, Shaw. So let's get right into it. First person on the list. I'm going to start from last to first because we just came off of talking about the combination of Evan Fournier. So it's interesting that you brought his name up. But do you consider you taking the over the under when we talk about a guy like Evan Fournier?
Yeah, Fournier is underrated, I think, at this stage of his career. I'm going to look at him as a guy who I didn't include in here as well, too. But a guy like Joe Ingles in Utah, too. And Fournier's better than Ingles is. But they go out there and do their job on a regular basis. Fournier's a 20-point-per-game guy, and people just have no idea who he is. I mean, other than, Matt Moore calling him Never Google a couple of years ago. And like I said, never Google Fournier because you will be sadly disappointed. But the fact that he's doing as well as he has been for 2 seasons now, and as you alluded to, just needs to stay healthy. I think he's definitely underrated as a guy and a commodity in this NBA.
Listen, the only thing that we can ever use for Evan is Almighty Evan, okay? Because we can't say anything about Evan Fournier. I think the thing that's missing for Evan Fournier, Shaw, is that we haven't seen him play under the bright lights, under prime time, for us to depict him in the same conversations that we've given the Manu Ginobili's and the Dirk Nowitzki's. Now, if the Orlando Magic continue to play at the level that they're playing, a lot of these games that are going to be important to them, they're going to be given those opportunities. And that's where I'll be very curious to see what kind of Evan Fournier the Orlando Magic gets. I have a funny feeling that Coach Vogel really wants to lean on him to be the guy, the go-to shooter. I know it's not just going to be on Gordon or Vucevic. I really think that he wants Fournier to be that guy. But for Fournier to do that, he's got to be consistent. So I'm going to go on your premise, Shaw, and say he is underrated. But when we start seeing him playing in primetime games, it doesn't live up to the hype. We might be revisiting this conversation. And you might see me throwing that thumbs down a little too quickly for him.
I hear that, and I think that's fair.
And he needs to stay healthy too, man. I'm tired of this boy always being injured. He's all over the place on Instagram, but when on the basketball court, man, you got to give him crutches. I don't like that.
Yeah, but the Magic need to play meaningful games, right? So for us to even get to that conversation. So right now, it's all breezy. It's early on, first 8 to 10 games. Fournier's averaging 20-plus points per game, shooting great from three. Orlando Magic is popping, it's moving, and he's in a great situation. But when it comes down to the Magic are trying to still be in the playoff hunt, then where's Fournier? Is he still healthy, and is he still producing at this level?
All right, Clint Capella for the Houston Rockets, Shaw. Over the wall or under the bridge?
He's under the bridge. I think this is a dude who's providing great value for the Houston Rockets right now. And might surprise you with a stat here. He's actually averaging a double-double. And I don't know that people are aware of that. You know what I mean? Like real hush-hush, 13 points, 11 rebounds a game, and 1 block, 1 steal. The thing that is stunning to me is the fact that he's shooting 70% from the free throw line this year. But I said all that to tell you the biggest shocker. He has the highest offensive rating in the NBA right now. And yes, it has a lot to do with playing with the Houston Rockets and the pace of what they do. But his offensive rating is a 139, my dude. That's just absurd. That's otherworldly. So, yeah, Clint Capella completely underrated right now in this NBA.
Yeah, 6'10", 240, and he's giving you what you really can't get consistently from, most other guys that are playing at that position right now. That says a lot to me. And he's one of the main reasons why the Houston Rockets are not missing a beat with Chris Paul being injured. Listen, we often too fixate ourselves too much on Eric Gordon and James Harden. Somebody's got to go get that basketball when it just doesn't go in for them. Okay. And while they shoot the most 3 points and make the most 3-pointers, they will brick. And when they brick, you need someone to go and get that ball. You need someone to help go get you easy baskets. And Capella, the last couple of seasons has this uncanny way of finding himself at the rim when the Houston Rockets need it the most. And that to me says a lot. He's definitely someone that's not just under the bridge, but also under the radar. And that might be a good thing because he represents a lot of what we see from the Draymond Greens, those type of guys where those sneaky numbers, they matriculate, they add up, and it equals to success for the Houston Rockets, having one of those, what we probably were already saying last year as being them being overachievers. This might be exactly who they are, which means wins in this modern NBA. All right, let's go ahead and switch gears now. Gary Harris from out of Denver. What are we talking about, Gary Harris? Over or under?
Ooh, I think he's even.
Oh, you're pushing on Gary?
I'm going to give it a push. Simply because I think Harris is a guy that has started to come into his own. He's underrated in terms of his popularity overall. Just the common fan who knew Gary Harris is. He has a very common name, but people don't know who he is per se. So in that regard, but I think NBA fans are starting to, those true NBA fans understand, okay, Gary Harris has a lot of value and has a lot of bounce and is a great shooter and is going to be a big part of what the Denver Nuggets do in the future here. So it's a little bit of a push for me, but I think I'd lean more towards the under than over for sure. That's only because, again, people just don't know who he is. So what you got on GH, man?
Mike Malone, I really want to see him put his imprint on what he wants from Gary Harris. I felt like he got lost in the sauce a little bit, and maybe it's because of this whole issue that was happening with Jamal Murray and with Emmanuel Mudiay. Because a guy like Gary Harris, to me, when he came out of Michigan State, I thought instantly on the right team, this guy was going to probably, have an ability to shoot the lights out. But his defensive prowess has spoken volumes and has really helped this Denver Nuggets team be a formidable basketball team in a very difficult division. And that just tends to get underlooked, right? Like nobody's paying attention to that. He's actually really the most important player on that basketball team because he maintains a little bit of what we're still waiting to see from Denver, whether they're going to be an offensively explosive team or they're going to be a team that actually gets to the grassroots of being defensive stoppers and finding whoever they're going to be their go-to guy is at this particular juncture. And that could easily be Jokic. But in this case, Shaw, I completely agree with you. Over the wall when it comes to how he balls, under the bridge when it comes to the notoriety, and somewhere along the line, it can marry the two through the course of the season. He could be a explosive basketball player for the Denver Nuggets moving forward. All right, let's talk about Marcus Smart. Ooh, Boston Celtics, Marcus Smart, over or under?
Under. No, a lie. Over. So I like Marcus Smart a lot, and I think Marcus likes himself a lot as well too. I don't know that in this situation in Boston that he will ever really be able to realize his full potential. So what he does there is exactly what Boston needs per se. But at his draft position, I think we all would have hoped and expected him to come on a little bit further than he has. That said, I don't think we still have those expectations anymore. So it's like, okay, well, he is who he is. He's going to be a hustler. He can change games with his defense, and he can even change games with some timely shooting when his three-point shot is falling. And he's worked very hard at that shot to be better at it. And he's been very good, I think, this year. But overall, still, I think he might have a little bit more overrated to his name and to his value simply because of where he was drafted to begin with and what the expectations were placed on him originally. So, again, I think smart basketball people are kind of like, all right, you know what? We don't need to expect these same things from him anymore. But I still feel he might be a little bit overrated.
Overrated with the position, underrated with what he contributes or what he gives the Boston Celtics. So I've never been completely sold on Marcus Smart's overall impact of games at times, because I think at times he loses himself in what a team like the Boston Celtics do need. But his importance is that he stays healthy. He's a hustler. He's a grinder. He's willing to defend in multiple positions. It's just weird because we talk about guys like that, and those are guys like Andre Iguodala. Those are guys like Draymond Green. You know what I'm saying? And it's just hard for me to fathom how his game does never translate where there's a consistent offensive flow to the defensive intensity that he brings. And at times he tends to take himself out. He's a flopper, which I can't stand at times, but you cannot ignore what he brings to the court for the Boston Celtics. So I just feel like he's overrated because of where he got drafted. But what's underrated is what he does bring to the table for the Boston Celtics and what the Celtics need. I've said for a very long time, Shaw, that the Celtics needed to move Marcus Smart, because then we could really see what kind of impact he makes on the NBA, not just for one singular team. But we got to live with the fact that this is what he gives you. And right now he is so embedded in the fabric of what the Boston Celtics represents that it would be hard pressed for me to now say, remove him from that and send him somewhere else. And it's going to do us any good, because we're not going to care for or like his game when he goes anywhere else. It's with the Celtics, and hopefully it will translate to the Celtics sustaining a level of success for them to be a formidable team in the Eastern Conference. All right, let's go ahead and switch gears now. Let's go back to the West Coast, and let's talk Sacramento Kings. George Hill, over or under?
I'm going to say over. And I'm only going to say this because of what happened last year. George Hill was very vital to what the Utah Jazz did, but he just wasn't able to stay healthy. And that has been, a kind of a moniker of George Hill for a lot of his careers, had a lot of injury woes, whatever the case may be. Played okay in Indiana, was better in San Antonio as a pseudo role player, but they got Kawhi Leonard for him. You know what I mean? A lot of people don't remember that. So Kawhi for George Hill 100 times out of 100 and twice on Sunday. But I think even now what little he's done in Sacramento to date, I just don't think it's going to provide the same value that the Kings are looking for, even as a mentor to De'Aaron Fox, who I just really feel like they should give him the keys and get out the way. So for me, George Hill at this stage today is a little bit overrated. I think he might have been underrated last year in terms of his value to the Utah Jazz, but to me, he's overrated.
All right, what's the record for the Sacramento Kings?
I don't know.
Like they're like 1-6, 1-7.
Yeah, 1-7.
Yeah,
1-7.
I just overrated. All right, you're listen. I understand that you're there to help the veterans, but you're not also there to help the veterans. Not the veterans. My apologies. To help the rookies. Yeah. I know you're not. You're there to help the rooks, but you're not also there to help them lose like this. You know what I'm saying? So like, what purpose do you serve? Now to me, he's the type of basketball player that he needs to be around other veterans. He doesn't need to be around the rookies. Okay, if you're the Sacramento Kings, you basically give the ball to De'Aaron Fox and get the hell out of the kid's way and let him steer that ship for the Sacramento Kings. I just feel like George Hill has basically become a nomad in this NBA. And in certain situations, he stabilizes teams, but he doesn't put teams over the top. And I've grown tired of that. I'm not saying that George Hill is not a good basketball player. I just don't like the load that certain coaches and other NBA teams seem to want to put on him to do that. I just don't think that he's capable of shouldering. You couple that with the fact that he is never 100% healthy. He never gets through an NBA season, or probably, since he's left San Antonio. And that to me just equates he's overvalued. And part of that overvalue is because of the undervalue he's giving teams on the basketball court. He might look good from an analytics perspective because his win share might be significant at times or whatever the case may be. But it just can't be overlooked on the fact that if you do have a young basketball team that's just wet behind the ears and know how to win basketball games, I just don't know whether or not George Hill is supposed to be that stopgap to get teams ready for what they're trying to transition to moving forward. All right, Shaw, we got a couple more left here. Rodney Hood, representing out of Utah. How often is the Hood in Utah something significant? Over or under a Rodney Hood?
Over.
You're so over? You're so over the Hood?
Yeah, I think I'm at my wit's end with the expectations of Rodney Hood to be, an impactful basketball player. I think he's good. He's going to be a solid rotation player in the league as long as he can stay healthy, for years to come. But
he has that conversation. He has that George Hill vibe kind of thing going on, don't he?
Yeah, but I mean, our dude, man, our guy out in Salt Lake, Tony Jones, he once told me he thought Hood could be a number one option, even with Gordon Hayward still there. And I was like, wow, T, that's saying a lot.
Tony got mesmerized by the left, man. He got mesmerized by the lefty. Like that's what he got. No, he got hit with the southpaw. He got hit with the southpaw seance.
I respect Tony Jones 100 times over. Again, he's a great dude and has his pulse on what's going on in Utah. But you make a comment like that, and it's just like, wow, dude. And Hood to me just hasn't really been able to live up to any of that. And again, a lot of that's because he hasn't been healthy. But you got to be on the court to produce. And I think there's times where he does disappear in games, doesn't have the same level of aggressiveness or even just confidence in his shot. So to me, he's an overrated cat at this stage of his career because I think a lot of people expect him to really take this leap, and I don't know that he's going to be able to do it.
I just feel like Rodney Hood has just pulled a hood over everyone else's eyes, man. I think he's a comparable scorer at times, but he's not a go-to scorer. He's not a reliable scorer, and that's the one thing that the Utah Jazz continually lacks. I mean, even when they had Gordon Hayward, while Gordon Hayward is a solid all-around basketball player, that's what you said as a go-to. What are you really getting from Rodney Hood? He is a good basketball player, but he's nowhere near the caliber of Gordon Hayward. So if he's not going to be offensively explosive, which is something that the Utah Jazz is clamoring for, then what purpose does he serve? How does he help balance out what you're getting for Rudy Gobert at that front court position? So I just think he's completely like over the wall. Toss him way over the wall. You know what I'm saying? Like it's over and under with him. Like you could like in a merry-go-round, just completely crazy. All right, Shaw, let's round it out with our man Chandler Parsons. I don't mean to be so harsh about him. He's a really good basketball player, but
yeah, he's a good dude.
He's a really good basketball player, but I think that there's way over the top expectations about what you thought that you were going to get from him over the last couple of seasons. It's just not going to translate, especially out there in Utah. All right, Shaw. So let's go with Chandler Parsons. over. I felt like this was a gimme. Like, I don't even know why we even threw this name in the hat, but give me your take on Chandler.
But yeah, he was supposed to be the leadoff, the primer to get us warmed up, but he's just, he's a soft close, if you will. So yeah, definitely overrated, Ms. Chandler Parsons, especially at this stage, not being able to really do a whole lot. And it's not his fault. I think he's come in with a lot of flair. He's worked hard to kind of get back on the court and the basketball floor and be a contributor for his Memphis Grizzlies. But at this stage, I think we just kind of like, all right, bro, it's cool. We know what it is at this stage right now. And I no longer have many expectations for him, but people still do because of the flares he saw in his days in Houston and even a little bit in Dallas when he was healthy there too. But overall, he's an overrated basketball player who just, again, can't stay healthy and isn't really that much of a contributor because, again, he just can't stay on the floor.
All right, well, listen, I'm going to end it like this. In the immortal words of David Fizdale, he ain't going to out-rook us. That's how I see it. David Fizdale, he's like, man, you give me whatever you can give me, but I'm not leaning on it. I'm not relying on it in the same kind of way. I think he knows this core team with Conley, with Gasol, and whatever he gets from Parsons might actually be an admiration rather than an expectation. And so, and that's saying a lot for somebody that we all have had some really high hopes for, when he came out of Houston, that we thought that his transition to Dallas, he was going to be a premier man. He was going to take over the reins for Dirk Nowitzki. That didn't happen. He's over here in Memphis. We thought hoops redemption. That hasn't happened. So he is who he is right now. I think until we really get a fully healthy Chandler Parsons, we'll never be able to kind of really calculate what his overall value would be, because everyone is just still looking at the numbers. They're looking at the money that he got. I'm just looking at the overall value of what Chandler Parsons could have given basketball teams because of what he showed me when he was playing as a Houston Rocket. He's been a shell of that person. And that's the only reason why I'm putting him on the over, because it's not fair that we're saying that he's a bad basketball player. He really isn't. But his health has not helped him along with getting back to where he needed to be for any of the teams that he's played for.
Yeah, like I said, you're right. And this was, it was a gimme, and it's probably one that we probably shouldn't have had because there's a lot of smart basketball people out there. It's like, listen, we don't expect anything from Chandler Parsons at all. So he's not rated at all, not under or over. He's not rated. And, he went off a couple nights ago, and everyone was like, yo, good for you, man. Like, hey, you got 24 points.
Nice job, buddy. Nice job.
Nice to see you again. You know what I mean? And that's kind of where we're at with Parsons. So, this was a little bit unfair. I'll take the blame for it. He shouldn't be in the segment at all. He's not really over or under at this point.
Like, people could have gotten free Papa John. People could have gotten free Papa John's pizza or could have gotten a free taco for that kind of performance that we got for Chandler Parsons.
Yeah. So, all right. My bad, yo. My bad. I'll take the blame on this one. Good luck to you, CCP. Hope those girls stay out of the DM.
Oh, no doubt. You are tuned to The Baseline. Cali, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and this was The Drop.
Coast.
All right. Time to ride out with us going coast to coast. Giving you the news in the association. Ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw.
Man, let's ride.
All right. Joe Johnson, Tristan Thompson, Al Farouk Amino, Larry Nance, what do they all have in common? They are going to be all out for multiple weeks. Shaw, out of all of those names that I threw out at you, which team is going to be most impacted with that loss?
I think Joe Johnson is very impactful for the Utah Jazz, but in some ways it can be good because Donovan Mitchell will get some more run out there. And the aforementioned Rodney Hood will have an opportunity to really prove himself. But Johnson was a nice stabilizer for them, was able to play the 3 and 4 position. So I think for him, it's definitely that's huge. But they're all significant injuries. Tristan Thompson, too, obviously was back in the center position starting, as well as our guy out there in LA, Larry Nance, starting over Julius Randle. But it gives Kyle Kuzma the opportunity to run out there in LA with Lonzo Ball.
That kid is impressive, man. Look, Kuzma. Kuzma is he's got like that Street Fighter in him, man. Like that kid is crazy right now.
Yeah, man, we got to get that guy on the show, man. I'd love to talk to that dude and just kind of pick his brain a little bit. But anyway, we digress.
All right. The Morris twins, fresh off of their legendary runs like Reginald and Ronnie Cray, those London gangsters, they're going to be back on the basketball court for their respective teams. Is that a good or a bad thing for the Celtics and Wizards?
Yeah, I think it's great, especially in the case of the Washington Wizards. allows Oubre to kind of go back to the bench and resume, a nice role coming off that bench in the 6th or 7th man. And I think in the case of Boston, is Morris, he'll probably come off the bench, and they've gotten great to see. They've gotten a lot out of Jason Tatum in the starting lineup, so I don't know that they want to change that chemistry just yet. But just having more depth is never a bad thing for either roster, especially in the case of Washington, because Morris is their starting power forward.
All right, Sean. And finally, I'm heartbroken, man. We teased it. We're going to throw it out there like it was something. Like I felt like I was a Nostradamus for the week. How the Pistons were showing some kind of interest in Eric Bledsoe, and now it's off the table. Why Stan got to do me like that, brother? Why you got to do me like that, man?
Because nobody wants Reggie Jackson. There's just the Phoenix Suns are like, not us, not the kid. They can't find a taker for Reggie Jackson's contract as of right now. So that's not to say that it won't.
Oh, I thought it was that they just can't
point.
take Reggie Jackson's attitude. I didn't know it was the contract. The
There's
contract.
Just no reason to bring him there. You got Mike James, you got Tyler Ulis. You're trying to get rid of a point guard. You're not going to bring Jackson there in place of Bledsoe. He's definitely not better. So I think, because the third team is showing interest in RJ, they're having some difficulties, and that deal looks like it's going to be off.
All right. Well, c'est la vie. Hey, I tried, man. I'm not saying that I should be a GM. I'm just saying I do think that I know what I'm talking about sometimes. So feel free, Stan. You know what I'm saying? Like, holla at me. I can help try to renegotiate some of them numbers for you so we can make this thing work, man. We got to get the Pistons up, man. We got to bring up the Motown City. We got to get it right, brother. Got to get it right. Awesome show this week, man. Awesome show this week, Shaw. Like, what more can be said? Really insightful conversation discussing the front court trios that represent the NBA right now, man.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of our more critical episodes where we really kind of threw some shade and some hate on some guys and some teams, if you will. But hopefully that gets the conversation going, man. We'd love to hear your feedback and kind of where you think we messed up. We're not perfect. We have opinions, but we try to base them off some statistics and what we see on the basketball floor every night. But again, we want to hear back from you. So let us know what you think about our best front court trios, and then also what you think about our over and under segment, in terms of over and underrated players, guys. So great show as always, my dude. As always, happy to do it with you.
Most definitely, man. So for the baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. We do. Keep us locked, and we'll catch up with you next time.
Hi, it's me, that little voice inside your head. You spent all year taking care of business. Let Office Depot Office Max take care of you. There's this new HP Pavilion laptop with 8th generation Intel Core i5 processor. Save $200. Now just $449. Look at it. It's only $449 at Office Depot Office Max. Go ahead. You deserve it.
Taking care of business.
Offer ends 11/11. Limit 1.